speaker is the ultimate authority, but the majority leader really gets to decide a lot of what goes on the floor and what bills are going to move and whatnot. When I spoke to him, and I did it on your behalf, and I told him that I represent you and that you are very interested in the passage of House Bill 1054. He said, well, we'll see if we can get to it, but there's a number of issues that you know, and we have a lot of other bills. In other words, he was not telling me what was going on. So I said, you know, it would really be nice because there's a group of really great students who have a very strong opinion on the legislation and how it affects them. And he said, Al, here's the deal. There are a number of people that really only want to restrict it up to 19 years of age being the maximum. There are others that want it to stay at 21. There's some budget issues as to what the impact to the general fund is. And then the whole tribal issue of maybe people will start driving to Indian reservations to buy their tobacco or vaping products and hurt small businesses or something like that. And I said, listen, if you want a group from Open Windows to either come down here to meet with legislators, I don't know that you can do that, but we'll talk about that later, or to lobby Indian tribes about tobacco products on the reservation. And he said, no, you don't have to do all that. We'll see if we get to it. Well, they didn't get to it. So I don't have a really good answer as to why it's a no, but I will tell you that the people that were opposed to the bill, I'm sure, have been working very hard. What they call the NFIB, the National Federation of Independent Businesses, that's a small business organization. The Korean Grocery Owners Association, or whatever they call it, this kind of the mom and pop corner grocery store folks, the tribes. I'm sure the tribes kind of don't care one way or the other, but they don't want to have anything that would start restricting, not that it would affect them directly, but they may have some input one way or the other. But I think the tobacco companies, I know that they were working behind the scenes very hard to make sure this bill didn't pass. The reason I know that is the lobbyists for Altria, one of the companies that is a big tobacco company, got a hold of me a couple times and was not very happy with me, was quite upset that I was lobbying on behalf of you and on the issue. And that's a good thing. I don't mind it if people are mad at me when I do my job. But it was interesting that they were worried. They were nervous that maybe this legislation will pass. Okay. So let's stop right there, and then I'll tell you what I think the next step is. Do you have any questions about what I've talked about so far, or where the majority leader's conversation was?
So this would be your chance to ask questions or voice your opinion or kind of wonder about the bill process, what's actually happening, what your guys' role could be. Ved?
How could this bill get resurrected?
Say it again, I'm sorry.
How could this bill get resurrected?
Well, that's where I want to go to next. But before I do that, are there any other questions or any thoughts?
Jack?
What would be some of the benefits of making an amendment to change the bill to 19 years of age versus 21?
Well, the way I understand it, there's a number of the members of the legislature are more comfortable with that. It's almost a compromise between 21 and 18, and they think that it's an incremental step. I've even heard the thought of an amendment when I was talking to the Heart Association representative who's working hard on this bill also, is that you would phase it in so it wouldn't be as big impact on the revenue loss to the state, the taxes that are paid on tobacco sales. And that would be in The bill would become effective in 2019 and would only go up to 19 years of age. In 2020 would be at 20 years of age, and then in 2021 it would go to 21 years of age. I kind of like that because it's kind of cute that you would 19 at 19, 20 at 20, and 21 at 21.
Yeah.
But, you know, that was something that didn't happen. But I think there was some interest in people who were arguing that it would have a fiscal impact on the state if you did it right away. So I think you're always looking at getting as many votes as you can get. That was a way to do it, either at 19 or move it up to tier it, you know, in 3 different tiers over a 3-year period. You could try it. But I would have to ask you if you had any interest in that one way or the other. So we'll talk about that in a minute, and that would be strategy. We've still got a little bit more time. Any other questions?
Jacob, did you have a question or was it an answer? Okay, so his question was about how we could undie it. So
okay, let's talk about that now. The deal with the zombie undead situation. There's something called a bill isn't technically dead if it has some sort of impact on the budget or the issue is necessary to implement the budget. We call it NTIB, necessary to implement the budget. And it's a trick. It's a way to keep a dead issue alive. So we're kind of in the zombie phase right now. And I talked to Senator Cooterer this morning. Do you remember Senator Cooterer? She was the sponsor of one of the Senate bills on this. And I said, well, do you think the bill is dead? The issue is dead? And she says, no way. I think there's a way that this can be part of the budget discussion because it has an impact on the budget. I don't get to decide if it's alive or dead. Senator Cooterer doesn't get to decide if it's alive or dead. But the majority leader does, the speaker does, and the majority leader in the Senate, they get to decide whether or not something is alive or dead. So we're in good shape in that I have, on your behalf, have put some pressure on the majority leader as an issue. And I think he does have some concerns about the budget implications, which is why an amendment for 19 years of age may be good to start with or to ramp it up over 3 years. But Senator Cooterer thinks it's a possibility, and she's in the Senate, she's in the majority party, and she's in a position to talk to leadership about trying to keep it alive. So I wouldn't be totally discouraged that the vehicles 1054 and the Senate vehicles aren't technically alive, but technically they may be because it's argued that the issue and the bills are necessary to implement the budget. So I'm going to still keep working on your behalf and assuming that it's alive, okay, if that's okay. But I do think we need to have a little discussion as to whether you're willing to compromise to keep the issue moving along, as to whether or not you are okay with an amendment that would move it to 19 years of age rather than 21, or the tiered approach. But I can't decide that. You're my client, and you have to help me to decide, to give me the instructions on what you want me to do.
Well, I think we had a few students who wanted to speak to that, whether they would be willing to compromise or not. And maybe they've changed their minds since we've had this discussion. But any of you want to speak to your compromising abilities? Mick, you want to take a step in so you can see you?
Hello. I do support the compromise, and I think we should change the age to 19 because this will help stop the secondhand sales in high schools, because often childs can be 18 in high schools. And this will still give them freedom to choose whether they want to smoke or not, but it will stop or help stop secondhand sales.
Very good. Thank you. That's good input.
Maya? Come forward a little bit because your voice is a little softer.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
My concern with at least doing the phasing, so 19, 20, 21, is that could just give the people the opportunity to like stock up, and then it wouldn't be as much of a problem when they're not allowed to purchase them anymore. So that was my concern with that, and it might just not be as effective because people would just take it as an opportunity to go out and buy more, so that for the next year they can, still use those products.
Okay. So you're okay with 19? You're concerned about the effectiveness of the tiered approach.
With 19, I like that they'll be out of school. Or out of high school. Of course, I don't think it would be as effective as 21.
Okay.
But I think it's better than nothing.
Okay. We call that a half a loaf. If you get a half a loaf today because you can't get the whole loaf, then maybe in 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 years you can come back for the other half of the loaf when you have a better environment politically.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Oliver?
Hi. So I would like to speak for the 19 years old amendment. I think it's a really nice middle ground so we can get support from both parties and hopefully pass the bill. And also I like how it prevents 18-year-olds who are in high school from buying them and then bringing them to high school and giving them to younger students.
Okay, thank you. I've seen everyone over on one side of the room. Now we have someone on this side of the room.
Yeah, Samantha?
Okay.
I disagree with amending the bill to make the age 19 because some high schoolers do repeat grades. So that means that they can still get it to their younger classmates and will still have the same problem. It just might not be as severe, but I do like the tiered approach because it's just a good way to compromise with the people who are hesitant to pass the bill, and then I'm okay if it eventually gets to 21.
Okay. Thank you.
Does anyone else have McKenna?
Just adding on to Maya and Samantha's point, people like 19 through 21 are still more susceptible than people 21 years of age and older.
Thank you. Thank you. In the back, I see one more hand was up a minute ago.
Go ahead, Jacob.
Jacob. And I was thinking similar to the tiered approach, but slightly different. Because my problem with the tiered approach is that you'll end up with people who they can buy it because they're 18, and then it goes up and they can't buy it because it's 19, but then they get older and they can buy it again, and then they can't buy it, and it's this weird, there's a lot of people who are in this weird limbo of can buy, can't buy. And so I'm thinking instead of that, if we pass a law that won't be implemented for 3 years, and so in the year 2021, then it would come into effect. So you have a similar effect where the economy still has time to move away from tobacco, move away from vape products, without this weird, you can buy it, now you can't, you can buy it, now you can't.
So you're looking at kind of a hybrid approach to you would have, we'd call it a delayed effective date. So you would say it's at 21, but it wouldn't become effective until 2021?
Yes, nothing will be changed until 2021.
Right.
And then at that point is when it comes into effect.
Okay. Can in these last few moments, Al, can we talk a little bit about how this bill could be phased into the NTIB, the necessary to implement the budget? Like, how does that work? Like, how is this bill necessary to implement the budget?
It's kind of a backwards approach. The way I read it is that the bill itself technically wouldn't be necessary to implement the budget, except it has a fiscal note. It has a fiscal impact. Usually, NTIB bills, if there's a positive impact, in other words, it's going to add more money to the budget. This is one of the few times, maybe the only time I've ever seen a bill where it would have a negative impact on the budget, but is necessary to have the budget accurate or correct in their assumptions if the bill passes or when the bill passes. So I'm not sure from a practical standpoint that it really is still alive, but we can make the argument to leadership, and the sponsors of the bill can make arguments to their leadership that it is alive because it does have an impact on the budget, even though it may be a negative impact on the collection of taxes and revenue to the state. Hey, it's an argument. And when you're in this stage of the session, you know, we've only got, what, about 3 weeks to go before the session is over. Any argument that you think can work, if you've got the vote, they'll make it work. So we'll see. It's a little bit like when you're looking for your sponsors. You go out and you get the sponsors and convince them that this is a great idea. The good news is the House bill has like 33 sponsors from the House, from the Republican and the Democratic caucus. So that's a really good start. We know there's a lot of people want this bill to pass. Right now, it seems to me that the leadership is holding it up. And if we can make the argument that it's still a good idea and it still needs to be alive, we'll make that argument because it's quote unquote necessary to implement the budget, even though it's a negative impact.
Mm-hmm. You
follow what I'm saying there?
Does that make sense to y'all?
Yes.
Yeah. Jacob, go ahead. And then Anika.
Another question. You're talking about leadership, and you said the Speaker of the House and the Majority Leader are two different people, but aren't they often the same person, or are they different now?
No, they're different. In the House, you have the Speaker, and then you have the Majority Leader that is kind of in charge of the caucus. And the Speaker technically is in charge of all of the body, Democrats and Republicans. But because he's a Democrat, the Democrats have the majority. He's really the titular lead, but he defers or he delegates a lot of what does or doesn't happen to the Majority Leader.
Anika?
So just going back to what you were saying about the fiscal impact. So what impact does it have on the general fund?
Well, if you're going to restrict the sale of tobacco and vapor products to a certain population, like the population between the ages of 21 and 18, and you've taken however many cigarettes or vaping products are eliminated, then the tax is not being collected on those non-sales because nothing is being sold. And there is a fiscal note that has been provided by the state, and it should be in your materials if you look up the bill. I don't remember how much it is, but it's just uncollected revenue. So that's the impact, is money they don't collect that they otherwise would be collecting like they're doing today.
Are these dollars allocated to something in particular in the general fund, or they just go?
Well, technically, yes. There's a tobacco fund, the revenues of which are used to help clean up Puget Sound. So technically, yes, but it's monies that they just don't collect. And if cigarette sales go down, then there's less money that's collected to use as a cleanup tool to clean up Puget Sound. We've got 1 minute to go, and I guess I want to get some direction from you. It sounds to me like you're okay for the most part with going to 19, and maybe some interest into having a staged or a phased approach. What I'd like to do, with your permission, is stay right where we are, and 21 is the number. But if I have to compromise, with the permission of the sponsors of the bill and the other proponents, then to start going back to where we can be able to get a bill that leadership will let go. And it may be 19, and it may be the phased approach. Is that okay if I follow the lead of the real proponents of the bill?
Can we take a quick vote of raise your hand if you're okay with a compromise to get the bill passed? Okay.
That looks pretty good to me, and I will do that, and we'll stay in touch. And the last thing I have to say is I'm still working on getting the Attorney General or their representative. They're interested, and maybe one of the sponsors or a couple of the sponsors of the bill, maybe next time we get together.
That would be wonderful. We would love that. I'm
working on it.
Great. Thank you so much for all your work on our behalf.
Thanks for your time. I've really enjoyed it, and we'll stay in touch.
All right. See you later. Bye.
Bye-bye.